Well, I want to say welcome to everyone and happy January. We have a rare treat today with author Andy Robbins with us, Andy Robin with us, and he's going to be sharing some of his very hard-earned lessons on how to navigate life in retirement. So if you want to check in with us and practice, you can put your name and where you're zooming from today in the Q&A, because we will be using the Q&A at the end, which is my favorite time, to ask questions directly of Andy. Just as a reminder, most of you know this, you're on mute, but we want to hear your voice. So put your questions in through Q&A. And we always want to know how we can do better. So don't hesitate to let us know what your thoughts and reactions are so we can improve our offerings to you in terms of learning how to navigate all of this. And also, in today's presentation, we are going to randomly give away 10 of these fabulous books, Tapas Life. So make sure to put your name on your screen so that we can choose you for one of these fabulous books. Okay. All right. So we are going to, before we jump in to Andy Robbins, one thing I always like to just set the stage is who we are. So my name is Kathleen Toomey. I am the Vice President of Mission Advancement at Riverwoods. We are a continuing care retirement community. So just to explain very quickly, a continuing care retirement community is a nonprofit, and there are 1,900 across the country. We are a very small family of communities here in New Hampshire with 3 locations. But a CCRC, if you're interested, no matter where you live, there are CCRCs there. A CCRC is an insurance product. The contracts are regulated by the state in which you live. This means the financial performance is also reported to the state annually. We are considered an opportunity to prepay or pre-insure for your future assisted living, memory support, or nursing needs. Therefore, a portion of your entrance fee and your monthly fee are tax deductible. At a CCRC, you need to enter while you are independent, and then we promise to provide your housing and nursing needs for the rest of your life. That means if you need somebody to change the light bulb in your closet, we'll do it. If you need someone to shovel or plow, we'll do it. We'll take care of all of the home maintenance chores so you are free to live your life and make your life a tapas life. You have much more access to activities, programs, socialization, opportunities to meet and befriend new people at age 79 or 82 or 91. It's also a way, very importantly, to stay in control of your life. So as we age, if we need more care, you have made that decision of who is taking care of you, where you're going to receive that care, and what it's going to cost. And we are a nonprofit organization, which I think is always a great choice. Riverwoods today, as I mentioned, is 3 locations: Exeter, Manchester, and Durham. We have a group board and a system board, and we are managed by a volunteer board of directors. So that's who we are. And as part of our philosophy, we try to seek out really smart people who can provide you some guidance at this stage of life in our programs. And one such person I had on the podcast, Seniority Authority, he's so delightful that we decided we needed to have him be here in person, virtually in person, because of his wonderful book, Tapas Life. And if you have put your names in the chat, if we know who you are eligible to receive one of these 10, which we're picking at random. So let me tell you a little bit about Andy, which I'm thrilled to have him here today. He was born in Chicago and raised in Mexico City. He's got a BA in computer science from UT Austin and an MBA from a very little known organization called Harvard University. Andy was an entrepreneur with his dad in the computer industry in the early 70s in Mexico, was in semiconductor industry for 22 years in marketing, but as a general manager and also as VP of New Business Ventures. He's been married for 38.5 years, which he's counting, and has two grown children, Nick, who's 36, Molly, who's 34, and Andy and his wife have are grandparents to a 3-year-old and a brand new little person, which congratulations. Is that little person a boy or a girl?
Uh, our son and his wife have 2 little boys now, Sam and Max.
Oh my gosh, that's fabulous. I love that. And
Very fun.
are they nearby?
They're about a 35-minute drive away. So we're in San Francisco, they're in Palo Alto. We swapped houses with them.
So great. You guys do things so creatively, and I love that. Um, so one of the things that Andy and I are going to do is just have a little bit of a conversation about his journey when he decided to retire and how he processed the opportunity and the obligation to figure out what to do with his time. He's a very thoughtful person and has done things a little differently than the average person. So one of the things that I read in his book, which I think probably many of you share, is a concept called the white rabbit in the snowstorm. So Andy, can you explain what you mean by that term, white rabbit in the snowstorm?
When people leave their long career, as I call it, the 20 or 30 or 40 or 45 years that they were working for a living much of the time, oftentimes their calendar looks like a white rabbit in a snowstorm. There's nothing on there. It's
Mm-hmm.
blank. You can't see a darn thing. And that's a good recipe for a little bit. It's pretty nice to decompress and do some traveling, see some family and friends, get around to here and there, get caught up on some things that really needed doing. That's really good for a while. And then after that, if your calendar remains blank, it gradually devolves into, well, really no reason to get out of bed. And that becomes depression. And I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it in a goodly number of my peers, sadly, very productive people who left the work world, whether as physicians or business folks or whatever. And then they found themselves getting into kind of a not very good spot. The solution to that is to create some structure. And it doesn't have to be a ton of structure, but it has to be some somewhat regular activities. And so you might want to, for example, in the morning, maybe you go out and get some early morning sunshine to set your circadian rhythm. You might go for a walk. You might do some exercise. You might read email, take a look at the incredibly negative news, have some breakfast, uh, but something to start your day that's a little bit of a motivator to get out of bed. And then beyond that, some people need more structure and some less. As I mentioned in my book, one of the people I interviewed was a CFO who most amusingly said that he averages 3.5 activities a day that are scheduled on his calendar. Leave it to a CFO to have that all in metrics, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But, for me as a house dad, after our kids went to college, it was, take the garbage out on Thursday night. It was do the laundry on Saturday morning every other week. It's things like that. Maybe exercise a couple of times. Social connection, super important. So get yourself out of the house, or if you're a CCRC, go find yourself some people to be with, have a lunch with somebody, cause something to happen socially a couple of
Mhm.
times a week. More if you're an extrovert and get your energy from being with other people. For those folks, it's a disaster to be at home by yourself.
Absolutely. And what's different today than any other time in our recent history is that people are living longer and they're living longer in retirement. So it was one thing when 1940, age 65 was the average lifespan, and that's when Social Security kicked in. People didn't live longer past 65. Now you're going to live 20 to 30 years. So you can't, a white rabbit in a snowstorm is not a workable solution for 30 years or 20 years. So it's incumbent upon all of us, and if you shout out if you are in retirement, to have that next purpose, to yes, take a rest, take a break, but then what else are you going to do in your life? I think that's important, as you said, mentally, because if there's nothing to wake up for, nothing to do, no reason to get out of bed, that starts a downward spiral.
Does indeed. And I
And
just read a fascinating thing about 2 weeks ago about life expectancy. So for decades, I've been looking at what's my life expectancy as a guy born in the US and my wife's life expectancy as a woman born in the US. And, it always said 78 or 78 and a half for me and a few years longer for her. Well, it turns out that life expectancy is uh, the age that people who are dying at the point that I was born had had lived. It's the length of their lives.
Mhm.
On the other hand, if you look at birth cohort, which is all the people who were born when I was born, it's much longer.
And are you a boomer?
I'm a boomer.
All right. Yeah. Boomers, as always, are changing the world. I'm a boomer too. We are going to be living longer than anyone else.
Yeah.
So just like boomers changed how they get married, when they have kids, if they have kids, how much education they got, how much travel they got, they've changed everything throughout their lives. We are going to change this again.
Yep.
So I have an important question for you that I think a lot of people face when they retire. People say, do what you love. But if you've been in a job for, 40, 50 years and you've been doing what you love or what you don't love, how do you figure out what to do next? Because most of us who are working are like heads down, doing what we're doing. We're not thinking about retirement in that way. And even financial advisors, when anyone or financial planners, when everyone says, what about retirement? All people are focused on is, I'm sorry, I've got to just decline this. All people are focused on is, do you have enough money? Do you have enough money? Do you have enough money? That's important. But what are you going to do? That is, I think, the real challenge.
Huge. Yeah.
How do you recommend people find their next passion?
Well, they may or may not find a next passion per se. And the fact is, for many people, their long career wasn't a passion.
Mm-hmm.
It's something they wound up doing, and it paid the bills and let them raise a family if they have one, and and they just found their way into it, and that was that for 30 years or 40 years or whatever it was. So uh, same thing in retirement. You may or may not find a passion, but you can certainly find a full and invigorating life. And so I did find it actually tragic statement about the the uh, the way that work takes over our lives, especially here in the U.S., not so much in some other countries. Um, I interviewed people who had no idea what they like.
Uh,
They had completely lost touch of what might be enjoyable to them. And so I suggest to folks, well, did you like doing anything as a kid or a teen or in your 20s? Could you rediscover something like that and see if that's something you could enjoy doing again? Or do you have some friends or family members or colleagues who over the years you've seen really enjoy something and be passionate about it? And when you get together with them, they're just telling you how great it is, and oh, I did this, and it was awesome, and with energy. And well, get one of them to introduce you to their thing,
mhm.
and see if it's something you like. And what's the likelihood you're going to hit on the first one? Yeah, not much. Possible, I suppose. But the great thing is it's not like your long career. If you try something and it doesn't work out, you don't lose your job and your house and your family. You don't lose anything. In
Right.
fact, what you get to do is you get to mine it for learning. Okay, well, what did I like about that? Well, what didn't I like about that? And that might inform what you try next. Well,
I love that. I love the thought of going back to when you were a child or a teen and you didn't have the responsibilities of a family and a home and making a living, to say, where was I? Where was the essence of who I am? And how do I go back and kind of explore that? Um, the other thing that I love that you talk about is trying something without the burden of feeling like you have to knock it out of the park. How do you recommend that people kind of wrap their heads around that? Because I think the work is not the same. We're not encouraged to make mistakes or take a chance. Or how do people break out of that work mindset to be willing to mess up and look uninformed or look like an ingenue or beginner?
it's it really is screwing your head on differently, and it's going to be a new muscle to develop, right? If you're going to learn to play the piano, you're not going to sit down and have your first experience be at Carnegie Hall, right?
Mhm.
And so the mindset to have for yourself is not that you're messing up. It's that you're trying something. In my chapter about this, the chapter is called "Fail Freely."
Yes, and I
For the
love that.
for the
I love that concept.
for the first time in your life, there's no cost to trying things and not having them turn out the way you want. So
Mhm.
you can call that a fail or messing up. I like to call it experimentation.
Yeah.
And look at scientists, and they do a lot of experiments that don't turn out the way they want before they find something they do want. And it's the same for us after a long career. And the real key to it, as I mentioned, is try it. And uh, don't don't let you get in the headspace that says, oh, if I try that, I don't know if that's going to work out, and maybe it'll. Don't talk yourself out of it before you even try it. Try it, for goodness sakes. And if it doesn't work out the way you wanted, once again, mine it for learning. That's the solid gold in the experiment. What did I like about it? Oh, well, it was a physical activity. And I really liked that. Turned out not to be the one I was looking for. Maybe I'll try some other physical activity. Oh, it's a musical activity. All right. Wasn't one I really liked, but maybe there's another musical activity I'd really like. Or it was a volunteer activity. I really
Mm-hmm.
like being a volunteer. But boy, the people I was working with, I didn't like them. Maybe I'll find a different group to be a volunteer. And so see what you learned and grab onto that and see what you did not like. And then when you choose the next thing, keep your eyes open and see, is it going to be full of that stuff I didn't like?
Mm-hmm.
Pass.
I love that. And it's experiential learning because
Yeah.
I think too often we can get very cerebral and say, well, if I do this, then this, but you don't know until you try it. And coming up with that list of pros and cons also helps you mine your new understanding of yourself. Like you may always at work have been the math whiz or the word whiz, or are really good at project management. But you're leaving those cells a little bit behind in order to understand, are you artistic or physical or political, or you motivated by helping other people? So it helps you to redefine kind of who you are and what you hope to become when you grow up in your retirement, because we're all still in the act of becoming.
Yeah.
And can we talk a little bit about the importance of being versus doing?
Sure. Sure. I'm just going to say one more thing on
Yeah,
where we just were.
yeah.
And that's also, it's not just an opportunity to look for something you love, it's an opportunity to do things you haven't had time for
Mm-hmm.
decades. So one thing I did coming out of the box was uh, there was a political campaign going on in a district about 40 miles from me. And one of the guys running in that campaign was just a terrible person, high up in Congress, head of a committee, and just doing horrible things to the environment. And so I spent 4 months driving every day out to that district, knocking on doors, handing out pamphlets, working in the committee's office, in the campaigner's office, doing scut work, doing anything I could do to help. And on election day, I was working an election area to make sure folks were behaving. And when did I have time to do that during my long career? Never. Okay, I'm going to go to your next question.
Well, and I think that's really important to just emphasize, think back on all of the times when you were working and someone said, can you be on this board? Can you volunteer? Can you do this? What are all those things that you put aside? And then I want to go back and talk about the power of volunteering. But anyway,
Yeah.
let's talk about being and doing.
Okay. So here we've been talking about all doing things. And really, if you think about it, from the time that you're a little tiny person trying to lift your head,
Mhm.
you're doing new things and trying to master doing things, finding some place to live on your own, your education before that. You're doing in your career. And this is the first time that maybe you're not encumbered by all those things. And you can take a good look in the mirror and ask yourself, who have I become? What am I like in the world? So, one of the things I adopted, gratitude is high on my importance chart. I don't know why, but it is. Uh, I started developing the muscle of thanking everybody for everything. I do that all day long with everybody. And there isn't a soul who looks at me and sneers. And when they smile, I kind of like that, right?
Yeah,
Maybe it
it's
helped their dad
infectious.
tiny bit, you know? And is that a bad thing for the world? No, it's a good thing for the world. And so that's one way that I was being different.
Mm.
My friends told me after my long career, for the first 6 months I was out of my full-time career, people saw me and they said, "Wow, Andy, you look great. You look like a new person." So apparently I was the boiling frog and didn't know it. And and now I was being different.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you can think about relationships maybe that you've had along the way that are broken. Maybe sometimes family things get broken. And now you have an opportunity to contact somebody and say, look, I don't know where we went wrong. Take the first step
Yeah.
and say, can we find repair? Can you tell me what's getting in the way for you? I'll share what's getting in the way for me. I want you to know that my intent is to have a better relationship with you because I like you and I miss our relationship that became broken. Well, that's a pretty nice way to be in the world compared to maybe how we have been being. And very importantly, excuse me, this is going more to psychology a little bit. And I ain't no psychologist, but I've read a lot and lived a lot. I'm 71 and a half. Uh, when you're a kid growing up in your household, there's a lot of family dynamics,
Mhm.
and you find a way to survive in that. Some kids, unfortunately, don't and wind up with pretty broken lives, maybe forever or a long time. But vast majority of people find some way to survive in that environment. And they do it by creating certain behaviors that work for them in that environment. And then they carry those behaviors forward, possibly through their whole life. But of course, they're no longer in that environment and that dynamic. And it may not be serving them especially well. So I have an older brother who's 6 years older. And, when I was 6 and he was 12, he would rub my nose in how stupid I was, right? Because, he'd show me an algebra problem and say, what's the answer? And I said, I don't know. And he said, yeah, you're stupid. And of course, it's because I was in first grade and he was in middle
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
And so, but he was kind of a mean guy. Uh, and so that's what I grew up with. And so whenever anybody for decades would say to me, well, Andy, the sun is going to rise in the east today, my reaction was always, I know that. I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's actually not very functional. In fact, it's
Mhm.
pretty dysfunctional. And it wasn't until I went to coaching school in 2011 at the ripe old age of 59 that I finally learned that about myself. And then I
Wow.
and then I had to undo that behavior. And almost all of us are carrying around something like that. I refer to a book I read that's pretty good about that, Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life by a guy named Hollis. And he talks about that well, and he knows more about psychology than I do, but it rang pretty true. So an important thing you can do for yourself about being is to inspect what are those things those behaviors I'm still carrying around that just aren't helpful, and what can I do instead? So now when somebody says, the sun is going to rise in the east again today, I say, oh, yeah, thank goodness. That's really good. Or I say, oh, thanks for reminding me.
That is very hard
Yeah,
work to do.
didn't happen
To
right quick.
No, I'm sure to reverse 59 years of embedded behavior, that is hard,
Yeah,
but worth doing.
so worth it.
I think of David Brooks and his book, The Road to Character, and he talks about, are you living a resume life or a eulogy life? And and part of being and looking at how you are in the world is to ask that very scary question, can I change? And the old adage is you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But we boomers have broken all of these assumptions. We're living longer, we do things differently, we're more active, all of that. Yes, we can change if we have the humility that you had to say, I need to change.
Yep.
And that's a really hard thing. That's harder than volunteering or having a second job or
And so worth it. If I learned that at 59 and it took
yeah.
me two years to learn to fix it, then hey, I may get another 35 years out of a better way of being in the world.
Yeah. If people want to start doing that kind of work, really looking at how they are in the world, where would you suggest, and if they don't, assuming they don't want to go to coaching school, how do you recommend people get outside of themselves to see themselves more clearly? How would you suggest they
I,
start? I know it's a hard question.
I'm no expert in this, having only my own experience to show, but I will suggest, think back on your childhood. Think back about your defense mechanisms, uh, about your behaviors you had to put in place. And if you can take stock of, one or more of those, if you have somebody close in your life, say, I've been kind of mulling on myself and I found this. Is this something you've ever noticed? And, the other person will probably pass the picosecond test and say, oh, yeah, all the time. Right.
Yeah.
And then you can ask in that vulnerable moment, are there some other behaviors of mine that you think could use a little attention? And I won't be angry with you.
Hmm.
My intent at this stage of my life is to be showing up as a better person in the world. I'm trying to improve, and you'll be helping me. So this isn't the thing where your feedback is going to hurt me. This is the thing where your feedback is going to be super helpful. And, try that on a few close people if you have them and see what they say. And also just watch yourself. Be observant of yourself with maybe more time and energy to do that than you've had. And observe, when I do this, what happens? And probably more like it, observe, gosh, when I did that, it didn't seem to work out very well. Or that conversation seemed to have ended pretty abruptly. Uh, and, ask yourself, how come? What was that? Don't ask yourself why. The why question always goes into defensiveness. Ask yourself what happened? How come that
Hmm.
happened? What
Hmm.
was going on there? Because then you can be in inquiry and exploring rather than getting defensive.
Well, it's interesting. The two things we've been talking about is failing freely, being open and vulnerable to I'm gonna take up the piano and
Yeah.
it's not gonna be easy. And also looking at yourself and your own behavior and inviting critique and trying to change. Those two things are a lot of work, require a lot of vulnerability, and require the openness to change, which I think is one of the things that is going to serve us so well for our futures. As we change is inevitable, change happens all the time, but as you get older, you do tend to hold on desperately to what is known and what is predictable. And if you can exercise that muscle of humility, failure, and change at this hinge point, at this intersection of starting to retire, I think that's a huge strength for your brain and your soul and for your future happiness. To not get so people get locked into how things have always been, where I've always lived, how I've always done things. And that doesn't really serve us in the second half of life. I would say.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, another place that comes in, if I can grab a topic, is if you have a spouse or an SO and you've been together all those years that one or both of you have had long careers, and now there you are at home
Uh-oh.
with nothing doing. It's the old joke. Yeah, when I retired, my wife told me I could hang around the house all I wanted as long as I didn't come inside. Ha ha. But
Or the saying, I married you forever, but not for lunch.
yeah.
Get out of the house.
And so, that's another such an important thing, is to sit down and see, well, where are we now? We're not the same people who got married a long time ago, perhaps, or who have been living together for some period of time. Uh, who are we now?
Mhm.
What do we like now? What do we like about each other now? What do we like doing together, if anything?
Yeah,
How do
yeah.
we like being together, if any ways? And, a fair number of divorces happen at this age because people find themselves, if you will, cheek by jowl, right? It's
Hmm.
not a happy thing, but it is a great opportunity. And in the book, I talk about some websites and some readings that you can go to find a good number of questions that can lead you through a conversation together to figure out some of these things and find a rich life forward so that you can maybe find your way together and enjoy these additional decades as opposed to doing
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
right? And including deciding to do health together and eating well, doing exercise, that kind of stuff.
It can be a rebirth, right? If you are both, again, I think, um, flexible enough to ask the important questions of each other about what bothers you, about what I've been doing, and understanding how you might be open to changing your behavior and open to living a new life that's integrated but not, consolidated. Like you both can do different things, but integrate them in a way that you share your successes, but not requiring, as some spouses do, everything I do, I want you to do with me. That's not gonna work. It's not, I don't think.
I suppose there are some folks for whom that works and probably a lot of others for whom it does not.
So I could talk to you forever. But I do want to talk about this concept of tapas life, which I love and endorse and think everyone should adapt to. Can you explain how you came up? Well, I know how you came up with this. Explain to the audience, what's your philosophy of a tapas life and why do you think it will help people?
Okay. So during my work and raising a family time of life, those 20-ish years, all I had was my work and my family. And so I make that up to be a huge porterhouse steak, an enormous baked potato hanging over the edges of the dinner plate.
Hmm.
And there was no room for any salad or dessert or anything. And so if you're not familiar with tapas, it literally means covers, something that covers something else, or lids. Uh, and it's one of the main ways that people eat in Spain. Or if you're in Turkey, it's mezes, and then they have the same equivalent in many Middle Eastern places and others. The idea is that you'll have many little dishes. And so you go to tapas bar in Spain, you order two or three or four of these little dishes, and they bring them with some to drink and a vinillo, and you sit and you gab and you eat these, and as you go, you order a few more, and until they kind of cover the table. They're the tapas for the table. And so the idea is more little dishes and not a huge 64-ounce porterhouse steak and a 2-pound baked potato, right? And so that's the basic idea. And after your long career, uh, the main concept is that you have the opportunity to create a life that you want.
Mhm.
Turns out for me, I like context switching a fair amount. I'm not ADD, ADHD. I have a long attention span. But if all I've got going on is one thing all the time, it gets a little boring for me. The fact is in my long career and the last 7 years of my career, I was bored to tears. I was a VP of a big company in marketing, and I kept asking the CEO, look, I'll take a demotion to director, what we would now call senior director. Let me move to finance or manufacturing. I'm pretty sure I'm good at those things, and I just like to change it up a little bit. He was like, yeah, no, you're too good at what you do. You can't do that. And so, but I like some variety. And
Hmm.
and this tapas life is awesome. Okay. So, I mean, just think about mine. All right. So, yeah, find something you love. I wanted to take piano lessons since forever. And at 52, I started piano lessons. In April, I'm coming up on 20 years of taking piano lessons.
Wow, that's
Now
fabulous.
I'm better than I was back then, oddly enough. I practice piano about an hour, hour and a half a day. It's my flow activity. I'm very left brain, very logical in most things I do. But when I sit at the piano, it goes right to my right brain and my emotional core, and everything else goes away. And sometimes I sit there for 4 or 5 hours. And when I look up, it feels like it was 10 minutes. It's a flow activity, right? It's not always easy, but it's very satisfying.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's mind-breaking work. I'm working my way through Bach's well-tempered clavier of 24 preludes and fugues, one in each major and minor key. It's brutally difficult, at least for me. But boy, when after a few months I've mastered another one, at least to my level of capability, Well, that's really satisfying. So
Yeah.
I found that I uh, went to coaching school. I now have been doing life coaching and executive coaching, although they're really mostly the same thing. It's always 60-40 of one way or the other. Even though people say I want life coaching or say I want executive coaching, it's always a mix because we're people.
Yeah.
We're not workers or livers, we're people. And now I cap my practice at 5 clients, all by word of mouth, because it's a tapa. It's
Right.
not a career. I do exercise. I used to work out 3 times a week. Now that we live in San Francisco, I walk everywhere. I bike everywhere. I've hiked all the big hills in the city or biked all the big hills in the city. And I play
That part.
piano. It's a big upper body exercise. And so I do that instead. I learned to be a good cook after I took over in our household as house dad because my wife wanted to go back to work. And yeah, everybody hated it for 6 months. And one fateful moment at dinner, our son said as a teenager, "Wow, Dad, this is pretty good." It was one of those "don't sound so surprised" moments. So I'm good at that now. And I became a wine collector because I like to drink aged wines. And I became our family travel agent and organizing stuff like that. And, you know, there's all kinds of interesting things. And lately, more for a meaningful tapa, I joined the board of a nonprofit, a charitable nonprofit. And after the past president passed away at 88, I became president. And so now I do that. And it's
Mhm.
super meaningful. It's not
Mhm.
a mountain of work. It was a mountain of work for 6 months while I
Mhm.
cleaned it up. Now it's maybe 5 hours a week or something. But at the end of every year, I give away $4.5 million into charitable organizations on behalf of the foundation. Well, that's pretty gratifying.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So this
That's
is
amazing.
this is a rich and interesting life, and I get to contest switch, and it's my tapas life.
And I like that for a philosophy going into retirement because I think a lot of people and a lot of people that I know go from high-powered job to high-powered retirement where I'm gonna lead this board, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do that. There's no breathing space. And I think you miss the growth opportunity if you don't leave breathing space. And if you're not trying new things, you are missing out on this ability to flex your humility muscle and your learning muscle and your change muscle,
And
which
all the world has to offer.
yeah,
If you
yeah.
think of a human's life as a rainbow, work is the color orange, or if you'd like, orange, yellow, and red. But what about green, blue, indigo, and violet?
Mhm.
There's a lot of life to explore. And if all you do is go into, another high powered work life, well, what didn't you see during your precious years on this planet? I suppose it's okay if you think you're going to heaven or going to be reincarnated. I think when we die, we're dead. And
Mhm.
so I want to experience the whole rainbow or more of the rainbow.
And I think it's generally fear, and I'm looking at the time, it's 10 of 2. So I am going to suggest that people start putting their questions in the Q&A so that we have a chance to answer folks' questions before we wrap it up. But I think that people are let fear block them. And would you have any recommendations of how to overcome fear of the unknown so that people can experience more of the rainbow?
It's particularly the get out of telling yourself you can't, or it won't work out, or it's not for me. It's take a little tiny step. So there's a there's a guy named Dick Beckhart who had a great change equation. He said the amount of change you can get is the product of three things. Are you sufficiently dissatisfied with where you are? Do you have some vision of where you want to get to? And do you know a first step you can take? So if you think of trying stuff out, well, you want to add something to your life. So you're sufficiently dissatisfied with where you are.
Mhm.
If you're not depressed yet, you'd probably go on like that for a while. But when you finally get sufficiently dissatisfied and that part of the product becomes non-zero, then you can say, well, what could possibly be something that could be of interest? And when that becomes non-zero and you can think of something, then how can I take a first step? If you're an extrovert, talk about it with somebody. Kick it around, hear yourself talk and think. If you're an introvert, read some things about it and sit and mull it over. Get out in nature and go for a walk and think about it. But the only one and only antidote is actually take the first tiny step and see what happens. If you talk yourself out of that, what we have there is no dice.
I love that. It's start now and keep going.
Yeah.
Start now and keep going and try more and more things. I am going to, before it gets too late, I'm going to go to the Q&A and get people's questions. I'm also going to share our next event, which is coming up, so folks can see that. So let's go to some questions. Jan Coleman has a number of books. She's a psychologist. Thank you for joining us, Jan. Independence Day, What I Learned About in Retirement, Steve Lopez. This is a great book, How to Know a Person, The Art of Seeing Others Deeply, and Being Deeply Seen by David Brooks, and Project Unlonely by Jeremy Nobel. Okay, we have a question here. As the oldest of six, I was always expected to be responsible. This has served me well in a long military career, and it has been difficult to shed that aspect of my character. Your thoughts? And I bet there are a lot of oldest children listening to this. How do you shed thoughts of being responsible? How do you change that, Andy?
The opportunity and curse of being the eldest, huh?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
As an
yeah,
eldest, I get it.
yeah, yeah. I'm the baby, so I mean you don't have to shed it, but you can shed bits of it. One thing you may have noticed is that oftentimes people are offering to help or to take
Mm,
charge of something on your behalf. You could try the incredibly difficult thing of saying, yes, please. Thank you. Could you do that for me? And not being responsible. Do it on something small first. People will be incredibly grateful to get the opportunity to do something for you.
that is great advice for an oldest
Yeah,
person. Yeah.
yeah. And apply your responsibility to something else. maybe be responsible in a nonprofit or be responsible being a mentor to a younger person.
Yeah,
Do it,
absolutely. You
do
don't
it
have
in a
to,
different way.
yeah, yeah. And be responsible for crafting a new way of life.
You bet.
Okay, here's another question. What was the most difficult thing you learned in coaching school, and how do you evaluate a good course? From Kathleen.
Uh, when it occurred to me to maybe become a coach, I had a leg up because my wife is an executive coach and was a prof at Stanford for many years in the business school. So I had seen it up close and personal, and one day it dawned on me that maybe I could do some of that at a much lower level than hers. Uh, so she familiarized me with an outfit called Coaches Training Institute, which at the time was in San Rafael, California, a couple hours from where I was living at the moment. And they had a book. So I bought the book, read the book. It was called Coactive Coaching. And I was like, wow, this works for me. And so I looked no farther. If I find my own personal style is I'm an 80 percenter.
Yeah.
My wife is a 120 percenter. And so if I find something that looks good, feels good, makes sense to me, I don't feel a need to go evaluate 17 more things to see which one is even more perfect.
Yeah.
And so that's the coaching school I went to. After that, I ran into people who had gone to other coaching schools, and they mostly folks are happy with their coaching school. Just like you ask a person if they like their car, they say, "Oh yeah, Hondas are great. Oh yeah, Fords are terrific." They don't say, "Yeah, it's a piece of garbage." So I didn't find many people bad mouthing their coaching schools, only good mouthing them. But see if they have some publication where you can get a sense of, more of what they do and see if it fits for you.
I think that's a great idea. Or see if you can audit a class before plunk down your commitment. We have
Sure.
another question. In your experience, what is the hardest step for people to take in retirement?
Doing something. The hardest step is talking yourself out of nothing will work.
Mhm.
It's changing that mentality, or changing the mentality of all I know is work and that's all I can do. Don't talk yourself out of things. Give yourself an opportunity to try.
I I love that. It's echoed by a couple of other comments here. To just start small one comment is I'm in transmission heading towards retirement. I've downsized to part-time. I've been lucky enough to have 3 different and successful career changes throughout my life. Your advice to get out and do at least something small on a regular basis is very helpful.
And if you haven't read it, then go out and get the book called Transitions, which I think he's sold 10 or 20 million copies of that thing. It must be somehow useful, and you may find that pretty helpful in your transition.
Yeah. I have another comment from someone who has the retired men in their town had started a group called Romeo, Retired Old Men Eating Out. And she created, which is great, she created a group called Juliet, Just Us Ladies, Imbibing, Eating, and Talking. And I love that. And she is saying that getting out and socializing is great for the psyche. So surround yourself with people that are trying to do the same, making the same positive changes, and maybe spend less time on your phone and social media. And I also have a comment here from Doreen: volunteer for something you believe in and you're most likely to stick with it, which I think makes a lot of sense and also exercises that gratitude muscle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the point about social activity is that's really just a huge one. If you wind up kind of cloistered, uh, it it eventually affects your immune system, and that's just a bad downward spiral. And I mean, for an introvert like me, moving from the suburbs where I knew a ton of people to San Francisco is being hard, has been hard for 2.5 years, is being hard. It's hard for me to meet people. But, I'm meeting some. It's more than none. And I'm out doing things in the uh, vicinity of many other people and talking very superficially with folks, helping them be seen. And so, but you got to do something.
And it is so important, this Harvard study that we have been talking about with Bob Waldinger, all the connections are important. The deep connections, the marriages, the friendships, and those light social networks, saying hi to the postman and the dry cleaner and the guy at the coffee shop, those also contribute to our sense of happiness. And as you said, when you smile and you say thank you, you've enhanced someone else's day, and it does make a huge difference. So you're spreading joy. And I want to thank you for being our guest today and for inspiring so many people. We have chosen the 10 people at random who are getting Tapas Life. So Kaylee is gonna reach out to you. Our next biggest, most popular event is downsizing, which is February 21st. A great time to downsize is the winter. So please use the QR code on the screen. Sign up now. It is filling up, so we don't want you to miss that. Downsizing is another really important strategy for creating some space in your life for other good things to come in. Andy, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your life, your time with us. It has been wonderful.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. And I would have to fire myself if I didn't make a shameless plug for my book, which I wrote for you. I wrote it as part of my meaningful tapa to do something good for others. I'm told I write very conversationally, very easy to read. It's a step-by-step process that you can do some or none of. It's a whopping $10 on Amazon.
I know, and it is the best $10 you're going to spend to help you reset. You got to reset your mind. When you go from working to retirement, use it to reset your mind and get ready for a bigger life.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in February. Bye-bye.